Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Plotlines. I'm your host, Connor, and today we're going to begin a new series on the West Wing. We're going to be talking about every episode. I'm going to go through every episode and discuss the plots as well as sort of, I guess, the propaganda that is going through the show. So this is an old show. It started in the 90s, went into the early 2000s. It follows the president and his staff as they go through different political events and sort of taking inspiration from all parts of American history regarding presidency, at least modern history. So probably all things in the 1900s, and then sort of meshing a bunch of different presidents together to make this fantasy liberal president that Aaron Sorkin, who is the creator and writer for the show, wants to give his viewers this fantastical vision of a liberal world. Of course, there are a lot of flaws in this. Aaron Sorkin is such an ideologue that I'm going to go through some of the ways that he sort of undermines um, other political beliefs, just straight up as propaganda. So that's what we're gonna do. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Make and look for future episodes. Hopefully you enjoy. So let's just start off how the episode begins. I mean, this is the pilot episode. We have Sam is in the process of sort of lying to a reporter, I think a New York Times reporter, about an incident that happened on TV the night before, or the day before, the night before, something like that, or earlier that day. We see Leo. So Sam is the deputy communications director. Leo is the chief of staff, and he is shown to be very wealthy in this first scene, which you don't get a lot of scenes of his home because he's working so much. So he has, a maid, and he is getting ready for the day. It's just important to see how these different characters are seen and how they're showing them starting off their day, because that's basically what's happening. CJ is a woman who is the press secretary. She is at the gym working out, so she is trying to balance her life. And Josh Lyman, the deputy chief of staff, is waking up in his office when he gets a phone call. Toby is the director of communications, so he oversees both Sam and CJ. And also, just so you know, Josh is the deputy. Leo oversees all of them. And we don't get to see the president right away, which is an interesting sort of. We get to learn about him from other people's perspectives first, and then we get to meet him at the very end. Toby, we meet, he's on an airplane coming back from somewhere, and he's making fun of airplane regulations and how he has to turn off his computer and he can't answer his phone, all that stuff. So I just find that interesting. So that's sort of how they're introduced. And then Sam also has a sort of a second opening where he's experiencing all the things that the rest of them are experiencing when they get paged or when they get called in, because the president got into a bicycle accident. But Sam wakes up basically after fornicating with what he learns later to be a prostitute who is also a law student, and she's smoking marijuana. So these people, they like to hold themselves in high regard, and Aaron Sorkin hides or sort of holds them in a high regard, but they are pretty depraved. And Sam doesn't have any problem with, his the person he's fornicating with smoking marijuana, even though it's illegal, which, I mean, he's part of the government. which should be enforcing that. So I just think that's kind of odd. I think it's sort of the hypocrisy rules for thee, but not for me, that type of thing. Now, so the main plot going on in the background is that Josh Lyman, the deputy chief of staff, was on a TV show and he insulted the Christian right, which it's funny to me if you look up the Christian right on the internet, you see that it's like that it's defined as sort of white Protestants and uh, white Catholics or something like that. It's very racial, which I think is interesting. They defined, but the funny thing is there are no Catholics part of this. The only Catholics that are ever shown in the show, for the most part, I believe, at least from the get go, are liberal, are pro choice, but they also believe it's wrong. They're personally pro life, but they're okay with babies getting murdered. It's a little strange. And of course, this actually goes into the president. The president, though not stated in the episode, is a deeply religious man, as Leo tries to explain to one of the reverends, to one of the Protestant pastors. Anyways, it's very interesting. So that's the main storyline. Josh insulted them. He basically said that they were all more worried about money than they were about morality and that sort of thing. That was insulting. And that's what gets everyone in this predicament. And on the side, there are a few issues going on. Cubans are on rafts trying to get to the United States. And then there's internal party politics with a senator and an ex-employee of the Bartlett campaign, which the president's name is Josiah Bartlett. So an ex-employee who also is Josh's ex-girlfriend is now preparing to launch uh, a primary contention in the next presidential election, which I think is probably 2 years away or something like that, because I think they're coming up on the first midterms of the president's presidency. And Mandy, she wasn't in politics recently. I mean, she was in the campaign, but but since she left the campaign and it's now coming back to politics. But before that, she was in business. She was working for Chase Bank, I think, or at least a made-up company. But the point is that this pipeline between the government employees and the big business, it's very much it's very much front and center, which is strange, and they don't seem to have a problem with that, which, I mean, they probably don't, because it's the strategy of this sort of the left wing is basically to dominate both government bureaucracies and dominate private sector bureaucracies in order to get companies to do what they want and to get money where they want to be and that sort of thing. Now, also Sam Seaborn as I said, is also based on George Stephanopoulos. So this sort of young uh, communications guy in the Clinton campaign. Really, the whole show is sort of a fanciful view of the Clinton administration, which is bizarre. Anyways, so also the Christian right, when we're talking about this, why is there so much to do over the fact that Josh Lyman insults the Christian right? It might surprise some people that, especially given the last 20 years, the Christian right was much more influential in the 90s. And of course, the Christian right didn't help themselves in the way they sort of went about doing it. Of course, the the churches itself, the Protestant churches, were very much involved, and that doesn't really that doesn't bode well. That's a dangerous situation. And the Catholic Church has always been sort of semi uh, inactive in or semi nonpartisan in these elections, which I mean, it's not true exactly, but you have the sort of the liberal, the modernist priests and bishops more supporting the Democrats on the surface, well, not on the surface, or sort of being neutral on the surface, but also really pushing democratic issues. And then you have more traditional or conservative priests focusing on abortion and pushing people towards right leaning candidates. Now, not specifically, but just sort of in practice, that's basically what it is. And of course, sort of that sort of divides the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is very much a divided entity regarding politics. Now, so this insult, president wants to fire Josh Lyman because of this, because it makes him look bad, and because the Christian right seemingly is necessary. They're trying to because the Christian right has such a powerful hold apparently in politics. They need them. So that's sort of the main story. Cubans on rafts trying to get to the United States is a secondary story. Sam fornicating with a prostitute is another secondary story, as well as embarrassing himself in front of Leo's daughter, outing that he slept with a prostitute, which will come back to bite him. And then this internal party politics. And on the sides, there's nonsense about guns and trying to, ban guns, basically. And then there's also there's a side comment about economic projections and talking about where the Dow is going to be in the next year, and these two economists are making complete opposite projections, which I find ridiculous. So that just says something about our view of economics, I guess. Now, the White House is trying to appease the Christian right, and the first thing they do is basically they have a meeting with the Christian right leaders, the evangelical leaders, and they want the White House Toby wants Josh to apologize, which he does, but they don't sort of accept that apology because they think he's going to get fired anyway, so it doesn't really matter in their eyes. And you're also supposed to see that there's like some good people on the Christian right, but because they have political sort of political activists, I guess, working with them, then that makes it a bad thing, because the Christian right political activists want something in return for being disrespectful. And then there's a whole thing about in the episode where the Christian right lady says something about Jewish, or not Jewish, New York sense of humor, and Toby takes that as an insult against Jews. I don't know what that is, but if anybody wants to explain that to me in the comments section, please feel free to. I didn't really understand that part. It just seemed like a excuse for Toby to get angry, and the whole host of things. Anyways, so Toby gets angry about that because first they were going to give them an address, a Sunday morning address, where the president was going to deal with family values. He was going to speak about family values. And you also learned that the president during the campaign would go around discouraging abortion, but also being pro-choice. So there's this weird dynamic going on, which I think is just it's an attempt to make the president seem moral, but also just he's basically getting in the way of his own morality. He's trying to maintain the separation of church and state, which really truly doesn't exist. And Josh makes the comment about how few past presidents would be rolling in their graves, even though that's not how things have worked in reality. That's just a myth that existed. I think the only reason separation of church and state has any sort of mindset is that I think Thomas Jefferson wrote about it once in one paper that wasn't wasn't part of any documents of the United States or whatever. Anyways, they also play up famous advisors, the whole George Stephanopoulos thing, like that people pay that close attention to all the advisors and fawn over them is just utterly ridiculous. I mean, maybe that was something that they were trying to push in the 90s, but it's just so weird today. Anyways, so they give them the option. The evangelicals basically propose you either need to take on school prayer or pornography as the topic of the family values conversation. Which, I mean, school prayer, I mean, I don't know. It seems like an issue that's not that important at the moment because of all the terrible garbage in schools. Like, things we're not worried about are school prayer, because the thing is we are worried about is sexualizing children. So pornography seems to be a perfect thing to talk about, though apparently the president comes in at this point after mocking Christians for making them look stupid because they don't even know what the first commandment is and that sort of thing. The whole point is just to mock Christians in general, and also to paint most Catholics as liberal or progressive or whatever. There's also like there's no communists in the first episode. Like there's no far left. It's very much that to succeed, Democrats really have to uh, sort of destroy the far left or keep them from any powerful position because they make them look bad. And that's sort of what's happened, at least. That's what I would assume has happened. The far left hasn't had any real power, so they don't need to work with them. But the whole point is that it seems like the conservatives are on the attack, even though we all know that the pretty much conservatives tend to be pretty worthless. And maybe that was a little different in the 90s, but I'm guessing that was just, liberal propaganda anyways. So the Christians look pretty stupid, don't know what the first commandment is. The president comes in and basically says, or he tells them to condemn radical groups of the Christian right, who apparently one of them sent a Raggedy Ann doll with with a slit, throat or whatever to the president's daughter, and she because she had talked at some magazine, or sorry, the president's granddaughter. The president's granddaughter was interviewed by a magazine at the age of 12 and was talking about being pro-choice. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's like the whole thing about, like, I talked to my 8-year-old and they were talking about how we need to wear masks and stuff. I mean, this is a whole ludicrous. It's basically it's incredible propaganda. Either this wouldn't happen, or why is the president's granddaughter talking to this feminist magazine? What the heck is going on here? It's ridiculous. Of course, it's just to show that the right wingers are dangerous and that they need to, and that these radicals need to be condemned, and that the president doesn't need to give in, doesn't need to talk about pornography because some crazy Christians are threatening them. It's just ludicrous. This is just sort of general liberal propaganda, and it's pretty easy to see, especially in 2023. There, like, the 90s, maybe this could slide by, but the whole thing is nonsensical. And one of the themes going on is loyalty between the president and his staff, and his staff to him, and internal loyalty. And at some points it's you know at some points there's loyalty, it seemed to be loyalty, and at some point they're going to cut each other off. Anyways, and then the internal politics is basically with Lord Russell and Mandy, is basically they're going to come at them and from the left, it seems. That's what I would see. But I don't know. That's basically the beginning of it. I mean, I have seen the whole show, so I know a lot more, but I want to do it. I want to go through sort of as if I had am only seeing this first episode and nothing more. Anyways, let me know, everyone, if you liked this episode. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And God bless.